Just yesterday, many Barbadians heeded the call from Prime Minister Mia Motley to pause for peace. It was a moment of silence to draw attention to the violence and crime that have been causing some concern in recent months. Tonight on The People's Business, we will discuss the factors that could lead to behaviors that result in the sort of violence and crime the country is experiencing. Joining us for that discussion are Kim Ramsay, a criminologist in the Office of the Attorney General, and Errol Griffith, who is the President and People Development Specialist with the Power of Choice, Inc. We'll get straight into the discussion right after the break. Good evening and welcome to The People's Business. We are looking at crime and the root causes. Let's get straight to it. Now, Ms. Ramsay, what is the genesis of violent and criminal behavior, not only among our young people, because that's been the predominance of what we're seeing here on late in terms of the deaths, etc., but what leads anyone to that path? What are the causes?
First of all, good night to you, Wendy, and good night to Barbados. I would have sent you a chart where I look at the different factors that contribute to criminality. I must begin by saying that, well, it's not very clear, but I'll explain it nevertheless. There are several causes of crime, and there's no panacea to the solution of crime because there are biological factors, there's psychological factors, there's social factors as well. And because of the complexity of crime, the solutions are not straightforward because what may make one person commit a crime may not be the same reasons another person commits a crime. So let's look at, for instance, the biological factors. There may be persons who have hormonal issues. They may have um, low intelligence, low IQs, and these are also factors that contribute to criminality. Conversely, you may have somebody who has personality disorders, and um, what we find, especially among the prison population, is that there are several persons who display personality disorders, antisocial personality disorders. When these are compounded with issues within the environment, for instance, um, coming up in what we will refer to as a suboptimal environment, the use of drugs, poor parenting, criminality in your community, and so on. This creates what may be called a perfect storm. So, so you may have somebody who may have temperamental issues, but then they may come up in an environment that is conducive to criminality. And when these factors combine together, these put persons more at risk of becoming offenders. It is not to say that one causes the other, but when we have these factors that come together or combine together, it puts a person more at risk of becoming an offender.
Okay. What about from within a cultural context in terms of what we might be exposed to, how society looks at issues of violence and crime? Could those as well be things that weigh in on an individual's choice as to whether they're going to go left or right?
Okay, if you pull back up the chart again and you look at the balloon that I've developed on cultural issues, you will see that I talk about easy, for instance, easy availability of firearms, the culture of violence. If we become a culture that is more tolerant of criminal behavior, and what I've seen in our society is we have moral decay. We have um, we have behaviors that are complicit to criminal behavior, and there has been the slide, the moral slide, the importation of values from other societies as well, the negative cultures from other societies. Um, um, I talk about
Things like what we would call the gunman
how we treat
songs.
to persons who have offended, as I said, the importation and so on. So yes, cultural issues as well as sociological factors. When these are present in a society, we see these as challenges that we may face
Okay.
in dealing with the problem of crime or
Okay.
making it more prevalent.
Let's go to Mr. Griffith now in terms of the factors. You deal with young people on a daily basis, trying to get them to focus on more palatable options, options that will not lead to them being incarcerated or injured or anything that is negative. For you, what has been, or what have been, because it has to be more than one, what have been some of the main factors that you found were underlying individuals who decided to shift a little to the right? Mr. Griffith? Oh, okay.
Good night, good night, everyone, and God bless you. Um, Wendy, you know that we teach this thing called the power of choice, and what we're trying to help all persons, whether young or old, to fully recognize this free will that our Creator, I believe it's God, but other people believe otherwise, has given us all free will, and in that free will, it means that each and every single one of us has power over ourselves. We don't have power over others. And so within that sense of having power over ourselves, we believe that therefore every single one of us is responsible for our thoughts, our words, our actions, and our feelings. And so what we seek to do is to see how many people we can get to realize that unless you've got a psychological issue where you can't manage your mind, that we all of us has have the ability to manage our minds. And it's in our minds, not our circumstances, not our situations, although they can all be influences. Our mind is what dictates our emotions.
Okay.
And then out of our minds and emotions, we speak and we act. And so our effort is really and truly to encourage as many people as possible to come to that understanding and then decide that they want the best thoughts, the best emotions, be able to speak what's best, and then do what's best. And I hope it doesn't sound simplistic, but believe that for all of us, it comes down to us, me, the individual, and our choices.
Now, I'm glad you spoke
And
to
s- Go
all
ahead.
of us having that power to choose. But I want to go back to Miss Ramsay's diagram, looking at the biological factors in terms of the impact of individuals with learning disabilities, low IQs, and who may have been products of substance abuse in terms of either a product of that because of the parents, etc. It does impact some children, or having access to it early themselves, and how that then prevents you from being able to adequately make that choice and to know what is moral high ground versus, deviant behavior. Is Ramsay?
Now, our suggestion. Oh, sorry, you're going, Miss
Yeah.
Ramsey. Go ahead.
Griffith, that we have free choice. We cannot ignore the fact that these are factors that are prevalent and that they are very common among the criminal population. When we look at persons who have run afoul of the law, let me just use the prison as an example. Even though using persons who are incarcerated may be seen to basically it's not a perfect representation of the criminal population because there are a lot of people who do not go to prison. But there are many common factors that we see among the prison population. For instance, we see the same issue of personality disorders. We see a lot of them as school dropouts. We see a lot of them coming up in dysfunctional families. So while these factors are there, we have to acknowledge that there are risk factors for persons who commit crimes. Um, because at least 70%, let's just use a statistic, at least 70% of the prison population have no qualifications. A lot of them are dropouts out of school. A lot of them have come up in, as I said, family dysfunction. And these are, as the literature states, as research states on crime, these are factors that are contributing to persons becoming delinquent. So while we do have the issue of choice, we cannot ignore that our environment plays a very large part in whether a person can become a criminal or not.
Understood. Now, in terms of that choice of criminal, because sometimes parents may find excuses. The word we use now is enabler. So they may do something that we consider to be small, or, you don't have to get angry about that. And then you find that constantly excusing these things, which may be bordering on deviance, then begin to escalate. And by that time, we've gone a little too far, Mr. Griffith.
If you permit me, as Ms. Ramsey was speaking just now, I just came back to mind with that when we began this work in 1998. One of the first things we were asked to do, and this was by Lucille Baird when she was running the rehab program in prison, was to come and join her. And we used to go into Glenderry prison every single Friday, and we did that for 2 years. Now, we didn't have what is now called the power of choice, but we're teaching the essence of it. And it was really to recognize in those 2 years how much the inmate actually related to the concept that they are responsible for their choices, regardless of their environment, regardless of their circumstances. And no, we're not denying that there are those with disorders, and those with disorders are those who have made themselves addicted to external substances. It's hard for them to really and truly rationally exercise choice. But from that experience is that we came to a real strong belief that anybody at any level could relate to this and then take responsibility for lives and then take their life to another level. But the other aspect of it is that while we teach this part choice even into primary schools, because we want even from that young age for persons to be strengthened and to strengthen themselves, I should really say, so that when they are faced with these temptations of life, whether you call it peer pressure, whether it's within the community, whether within the household, etc., that they can be able to decide, something, this is a path that I will not go down.
Mm.
And so, on one hand, it's preemptive, And then on the other hand, with those who already are within a habit of making less than the best or wise choices, what we want to be able to do is to encourage them to look at themselves, self-reflect, and then really and truly decide, here, is this the life I want to continue, or I want to continue another life? But on the foundation of the truth is, I am responsible
I'm glad you
for
spoke
my
to the
responses and my
issue
choices.
of self reflection, and this is where I want to bring in Miss Ramsay because um, if there were indeed a great deal of self reflection, would we have the high number of recidivists that we do have now, Ms. Ramsay?
I've been listening to Mr. Griffith, and this is one of those debates that we could always go on ad infinitum. 68% of the prison population has reoffended, and they will continue to reoffend. So that is a very high figure, and that figure has been constant. What I mean by reoffend is that at some point they will come back into the criminal justice system, whether as a rearrest or reconviction or reimprisonment. 68% is not a small figure. Um, these persons who come back into the society, they face a lot of challenges. And this is one of the factors that I have mentioned in my slide. It is not an excuse because there are people who succeed and come back into society and they do well. But the reality is that it is an uphill battle, and this is not only in Barbados, but this is worldwide. People who come back into society face an unforgiving society. They face a society who has labeled them as jailbirds, who want nothing to do with them. Some of them have committed some very serious crimes, so we do understand why society will see them the way they are. But it is an uphill battle when they come back into society. This is one of the challenges that offenders face, and it is one of the contributing factors to reoffending.
Okay.
People do not want to hire them, and then they go back into the same criminal element and the same criminal friendships, criminal communities that caused them to reoffend in the first place. And some of them reoffend within 6 months of being released from prison. What we have to do is work with the offender population. Um, Aftercare, which is something that is in the prison, which needs more work than being done with it. We need to work with persons who return to society and need jobs. They have substance abuse issues. They have mental health issues. Some of them suffer from homelessness because some of their families do not want them to return to their homes. They lack skills, both social skills, and they're unemployable. And these are the real challenges that we face with our criminal population,
Okay.
especially as it relates to the issue of substance abuse.
Big.
Substance abuse is one of those things that we do not pay a lot of attention. We pay attention to, but not enough attention to it. And I recently interviewed two psychiatrists for a book that I'm writing, and they address the issue of mental illness and personality disorders, which are compounded with the use of substance, which which exacerbates the issue of criminality or causes persons to be more crime prone.
Okay.
And it is something that it is one of those debatable issues because they're mostly talking about the use of marijuana or alcohol. Now, there are some people who can smoke or use marijuana and it does not impact them. There are others who in fact, it impacts them differently. And these are the issues that we need to address
Okay.
because when we look at the offender population, quite a large percentage of them have been under the influence of a mind altering substance, which affected or made them more likely to be involved in criminal behavior.
Okay. We're going to
So
have to
these are
take
all
a
the issues that we have to
right.
address
We're going to
when we
come
speak
back
about
and
crime.
look at it more because I want to get back to the issue of the skill sets that they may or may not obtain while in prison and how they could perhaps use those for employability and the whole idea of maybe perhaps halfway housing in terms of dealing with former inmates. We have to take a commercial break here, but the People's Business will be back. And when we return, we'll take your calls, 228-5562, 228-5563. The People's Business Live will return in a moment. And the People's Business is back. We're looking at crime, its root causes. With me, I have criminologist Kim Ramsay and Mr. Errol Griffith of the Power of Choice. Now, before we went to the break, Ms. Ramsay was talking about a number of issues which they face in terms of once they've served their sentence and they're released back into the society. Now, Mr. Griffith, in terms of that power of choice, your organization, other NGOs, how much outreach is actually done or can be done at that stage of release from incarceration to be able to help them understand how to cope with the society they're now back in, especially given that in some instances, some of them may have served an exceedingly long time behind bars. Like Ms. Ramsay said, sometimes family members don't want them back. And if they don't want them back once released, maybe there's a possibility that they may not have been visiting them while in incarceration. Therefore, nobody has really brought them fully up to scale with how society is now. So they're coming back into a space where a lot of changes have taken place development-wise, and coping seems like the biggest burden that they now have to face.
All right. We're not denying anything that Miss Manji said at all from the research, but the focus is, okay, these are all the societal challenges you're going to face. If you have a mental challenge, that's not going to change overnight. Okay. If you find yourself addicted, that's not going to change overnight. But I see the intervention being in two major areas: having something effective to help persons to strengthen themselves to make better choices, and then having the support post incarceration of again strengthening. So I see it either in prison, where they really don't have many choices outside of within the prison system, and then when they're out, I guess they're free to decide whether they want to be part of some type of support mechanism. But when I saw the topic tonight in terms of crime and the root causes, I was not only thinking about those who are incarcerated, because there are many of us who are committing crimes who are not behind bars, and so really and truly, it was like, in my thinking, Wendy, is how do we create a mindset and a culture throughout our country, regardless of organization, that people can adapt and they can be strengthened mentally to make better choices in life, full stop.
Okay, I guess we have to then look, Mr. Griffith, possibly at a in sync situation where our schools or churches or NGOs, everybody is working in tandem toward that common goal of trying to reduce these causes, these possibilities of an individual becoming criminal. And I believe it starts with some level of delinquency, and it then continues to graduate. Now, a question I have for you, Ms. Ramsay, in terms of the root causes. Sometimes all of us may be predisposed to the same factors in and around. Let's say we have 5 people, all very close knit, etc. And you have a situation whereby 3 decide to do that which is right, and they will find employment however it comes that suits both their mental capacity as well as skill sets which they may have. But the other 2 decide to go a totally different path. And it comes to a point whereby even something like a long-lived friendship no longer matters. It doesn't matter that you're my friend again. If I know you have money, I'm going to rob you once I get the next best opportunity. Okay, so what for both of you would trigger those kind of reactions, actions within an individual? Because we've all been exposed to the same things in this life? And I just want some brief responses from you because we have a caller on the line.
Everybody reacts to external stimuli differently. That is my simple solution and simple response. There are two persons that are raised in a household, and one may choose to go one path and the other chooses a different path. At the end of the day, it comes down to the individual and their personality, their temperament, their exposure, um, but and how they let their environment impact on them. So while I understand what Mr. Griffith is saying about free choice, the reality is that people come up in the same environment, but how they react to their environment may differ, or they may react the same way.
Okay. Good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, good night, Randy, to you on the panel.
Good evening.
Good night, Randy, to you on the panel.
Yes, go right ahead with your question.
Right. The first thing, we have let down all our morals in the society have gone down. We have taken God out of everything. I feel that Sunday should be a solemn day. And then we take away the discipline from the parents and the teachers. And then expect the children to do well. So we'll always have problems there.
Okay. So the caller is suggesting that we've taken morality out of the picture and the discipline that parental control more or less has either been taken away or given away. Your take?
Well, there's no question that the sense of morals in our society is not what it was in the 70s and 80s. And there are things that we do now, publicly and otherwise, that were not accepted as normal or right. And now many people feel, well, nah, it's okay, I could do whatever I want. So yes, so the moral fabric has in no doubt whatsoever declined.
Okay. We have another.
And then he also talked about.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
We have another caller. Good evening. Good evening to you. Go right ahead with your question.
You hear me? I want persons to make a statement too. Who are these people in society?
Could you speak up for me?
Yeah, who are these people in society that can stop devious behavior? Let me just say this thing. Devious behavior started many, many years ago. And I want people to believe that. It's no worse in the olden days. There's no worse now than the olden days, but just be in thinking. And let me tell you something about this matter. There are people there who commit crime. Nobody knows. Years and get away with it. A lot of people not some psychologists tell you this. There are people who commit serious crimes. Never been caught. People never even think of it that they have to commit crimes.
Okay. Right. So the caller is basically saying that, like, and I think Mr. Griffith mentioned it before, that there are lots of people who commit crimes that go unnoticed, unpunished. Ms. Ramsay?
It is true. It is true. In the 70s and 80s, we had a different type. We've always had crime. I mean, we can't get away from that. We've had a lot of predatory crime in the 80s. We had the Canfield murders of the 80s, as you would recall. Mm-hmm. But we've now had more availability of and access to firearms. And this has affected our homicide rates in a serious way. We've gone away from, so the murders in the 70s and 80s were a lot of cutlasses, knives, stabbings, and beatings and so on. I actually have some statistics here from 1978. Right next to me, we only had 2 shootings in 1978. Interestingly, one of them was the Pele case. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, most of the murders were either knives, beatings, or chops or so on. We have no, as I said, with the availability of firearms, we have now moved on to the type of weapon. We've also had more murders because we cannot deny that our society has become more aggressive, more violent, and in the age of technology, which I have addressed in my in the slides that I talked about, that has had an impact on our crime statistics as well.
Okay, we have another caller. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, go right ahead.
Listen, you all have intellectualized this whole situation. You have intellectualized this whole situation. There's a lot of talk and discussion, and people talking pretty and want to sound good and want to demonstrate that they have some sort of super common sense or something sort. But you are not addressing the real root cause of the problem.
And what for you is the real root cause?
Don't let us leave the cause first. But you're rewarding criminals. All sorts of excuses about what affects them and so on and so on. But the people need to be punished.
Okay, I want you to explain what you mean by we're rewarding criminals.
By not punishing them.
But isn't incarceration the punishment?
Incarceration? The people want licks.
Okay, I believe he's suggesting that we go back to things like public floggings and the like. But I think last I checked, Barbados was signatory to a number of international conventions which speak out against these things. Punishment, he's saying we're talking pretty, but we're not getting at the real cause. But I believe that sentencing goes along with crimes. We are now taking the gun crimes far more seriously in terms of how they're bailed, how the charges come up, that type of thing. So we are seeing the punishment for those. But should we go back to a stricter form of punishment? Is that really the way to stop crime? Is it?
I would let Ms. Ramsay go first.
Oh, okay.
No, it is not going to solve crime because it's not going to address the social problem. It's not going to address the social causes of crime. So we cannot beat ourselves out of the problems of that we face with crime. There are still social issues, structural issues, and all the other issues that I've spoken about. So at the expense of being accused of talking pretty, the reality is that these are the problems that we face.
Okay, and Mr. Griffith?
So if we have a man who has a personality disorder, who is abusing substances, who has psychological issues, who has brain damage, who has come up in an environment where he's being abused, where he's being taught that violence is the solution to any problem, beating him is not going to address the fact that he has come up in that environment, that he has suffered, or he has all of these other factors affecting him. And we are just basically putting a plaster on a festering sore. So we still have to address the determinants of crime. And until we get to these factors and we identify persons who are considered at risk, then we're basically spinning top in mud. And we're not addressing the issue. We cannot, and I'll say it again, we cannot beat ourselves or beat people out of committing crime.
Okay. Mr. Griffith, quickly before we go to break.
Social, structural issues need to be solved. But I also believe that we can try to play a part to strengthen the individual to be able to better understand right and wrong choices and try to find a way to influence them towards making right choices more and more often, and we talk so much about. Sorry, I forget what the word the guy used just now was punishment.
Yes.
But I say let me find ways of having consequences, both consequences which reward right choices, but also consequences which seek to influence persons no longer making wrong choices.
Okay, we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll have more discussion on the root causes. And I ask for our caller to just bear with us during this commercial break, and we'll get right back to you. People's Business Live. And we're back with the People's Business, where we're looking at crime and its root causes. Kim Ramsay and Errol Griffith with us. But let's go straight to the phone line to see if that caller is still there with us. Good evening to you.
Hi, Wendy.
Yes, hello to you. Go right ahead.
And hello to your panelists. I've heard Ms. Ramsay speak to this issue on several occasions, and one of the most poignant points that she made that resonated with me was the fact that criminality and criminal activity is a learned behavior. And I'd like to comment from each of the panelists about mechanisms to unlearn that behavior. And the second part of my question is I want a comment from both panelists about the part that poverty and perceived hopelessness plays in the development of criminal activity. Thank you.
Okay, you've both heard the two questions?
Yes, I have heard. I've heard the question. Yes, criminality is a learned behavior. It's not always a learned behavior, but it is, in many circumstances, a learned behavior. To unlearn such behavior, you need to be placed into structured programs, cognitive behavioral programs, and other types of programs which are conducted by trained professionals, where they would teach you mechanisms and skill sets on how to basically unlearn the behavior. It is not something that can be done overnight, because crime is not something that you learn overnight. Some people are born into, they're not born criminals, but they're born into environments where they have been exposed to criminal activity, or they have been taught criminal attitudes all their lives. So it is a process where you have to be taught what more pro-social behaviors and pro-social responses to criminal behavior. That's that part of the question. The other question was about poverty.
Poverty and hopelessness.
Yes. Now, while poverty is not a cause of crime, it cannot be ignored that it is a risk factor. Not all poor people commit crime. And let's just say that right now. Not all poor people commit crime. But we do see persons who engage in crime tend to come from the lower socioeconomic brackets of society, where issues like lack of education, lack of access to employment, family size, family conditions. For instance, just to give you an example, there are persons who come up in a household where there's poverty, there's no food in the house, and the mother says, you got to pay a bill. You can't live in here all the time. You have to help. And they go and find out any means to make money.
Okay.
So this goes back to what Mr. Griffith was saying. I mean, how do you tell a person who has to pay a light bill of $100 and something, and there's nobody in the house that's working. There's 25 people in the household, and they're living, they're living from day to day without any means of subsistence. And then there's the person who will come to them and lure them with, we know that you're poor, we know that you don't have any food, and this is a reality that happens. But here is a 5 bag, or here is a gun. You go and commit a crime for me, and I will take care of you. This is the challenge. This is one of the real challenges that we face in our society, where people are lured into criminal behavior because they are looking for ways to survive. And if it is picking up a gun or committing a robbery or working for a gang leader, they're going to do it because that's a way of survival.
Okay, we have another caller. Good evening to you.
Evening.
Go right ahead.
Good evening.
Yes, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I just want to find out, one question. With all these organizations that we have, Peace Program and all these organizations, is there a success statistic showing that some of these things have been lessened, some of these issues have been lessened?
You want to take this, Errol, in terms of reviewing some of your programs, the impact?
Well, I haven't done the research in itself formally as Kim has done, huh? But Wendy, if I switch a second to an example that you can relate to. Your son is in St. Leonard's Boys Choir, correct?
Yes.
and you see the excellence of that choir, where it's almost the best of the choirs in Barbados, and that can be said objectively. Okay, but that same teacher who is able to get boys at St. Leonard's and to be an influence in their lives, or they allow him to influence them where they perform at that level as it relates to singing, is also able to get students in second and third form at St. Leonard's to pass CXC, Spanish and French. But I remember Spanish in particular, all right? And then I remembered last year when he was in charge of Form 1D, he challenged his students and put the supporting mechanism in place to be able to excel academically, which he's been doing for a long time. But the stats in my head are the ones from last year, and not this previous school year immediately, but the one before, where he was able to influence, to be influencing his students. The lowest grade being 50-something%, the highest being 80-something at the end of the third year in the exams. But another striking statistic was that the boy that came 18th in his class would have come first in any of the other 5 or 6 first forms. So when you talk about a success, and I take it outside the gamut of what we call crime, the whole idea is that we want to be positive influencers in the lives of others. And so the example I just highlighted of Andrew Loki was him being able to go against the grain and be an influence in his students excelling academically across the board. And then we have the additional example of him within the framework or gamut of music. And so how can we take from examples like his and others and seek to broaden them across our society?
He is an excellent example of, encouraging boys not to turn to crime. But as Ms. Ramsay would have pointed out, there are boys who unfortunately have absolutely no role model. Yeah. Some of them have no dad around, no uncle, whatever. And it's just them, mom, she's working constantly, what have you. And the support mechanisms, because that too plays a large part in terms of where we go, whether you are now about to commit the crime or if you have committed what we might deem a small one and we don't want to see you graduating to bigger ones. Let's go to a caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, go right ahead.
First, I must say that I agree with Mr. Griffith, we have a power of choice. Children in Barbados, we are blessed with free education. They are blessed with free education. Some choose to go to school and do nothing and cause trouble, while others choose to go to school and listen to their teachers and to get a decent education so that they will not find themselves as grown-ups on poverty line. As Miss Ramsay was saying, being on the poverty line and not earning is one of the solutions for crime. I'm saying to us tonight, to Barbados, that we need to get back to a spiritual grounding. We have, as the church community, have to pray for the sins committed on the parts of our leaders, and we have to get our children back into church and have to get religious knowledge back into all the schools, because I think I understand that religious knowledge is still taught in certain schools. But we need to get that spiritual grounding back and have our children, if we can't take them to Sunday school or to church, let them know that they must go to Sunday school and to church and have that spiritual grounding.
Okay.
I am saying that this will help with the mentality of our youngsters, and it can be a cause or a solution to the crime problem that we are having at this current time.
Okay, sir, thank you so much for your comment. And on that note, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the root causes of crime. The People's Business will be back after the break. And welcome back to the People's Business. We're going to go right to the phone lines for our final caller for the evening. Good evening to you. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Good evening. I just want to make a brief comment. Within the media recently, there was a lot of talk about the video that was circulated in schools with the primary school kids, doing their whatever behavior in the classroom. And it was condemned across all, different platforms and ministry, etc., etc. But when you sit and look at television on Saturday, you saw kids Kaduma, they're doing the same thing. So how is it that we can condemn one set of kids because they're doing it in school, and then you try to tell me then that what they do on Kiddies Kaduma is acceptable? It's the same thing. So, there must be some sort of something. What are we saying? That's our culture? I mean, I don't know. That's my thought.
Okay. Well, it's not a crime to dance up, but what was in the classrooms was more of a sexual simulation, if we could call it that. I was actually saying that yesterday's Kiddies Kaduma was rather tasteful because most of the children were chipping as opposed to, doing full gyrations or going down to the ground or anything like that. But I get the point she's making in terms of environment. And I think that's what the issue is there, because the classroom, more or less, is not necessarily the place for that, or what they were doing, close to each other, that type of way. Yesterday now is part of a festival, greater, broader cultural display. So I guess maybe we can correlate it back to a crime situation. So if you have inflicted an injury on someone and it was videotaped in the classroom, yes, we know that's the crime, we can find you. But if it is just random on the street and you get away, is it not the same thing that was done? I guess is the point she's coming to. How do we judge
I
them?
think the,
Go ahead,
only
Errol.
people in this country that commit crimes are not those that are incarcerated. We talk about white collar crime and people doing wrong. Let me use the word doing wrong at all levels. And it's not only those who are in poverty. When you're in poverty, you're more desperate. But I think both whether you're in poverty or you're not in poverty, it's really about your principles and values and the ones that you choose to believe in and you choose to live by. And I heard the guy earlier, the one caller, talking about wanted to get back to church. I think is what he was saying. I'm not. I mean, I'm a Christian. There's no question about it, and I believe that a relationship with God, and not just going to church, can help anyone in the transformation of their life. But I think as a wider society where we're not all Christian, you can't impose church on people. The challenge is for us who call ourselves Christians to really and truly live by the values and not compromise. And then the other element is how do we treat or teach those values beyond the four walls in a ways that people can receive them.
Okay, we decided to let one more caller in for the evening. Can you make it very brief because we have to have our parting words from our panelists. Go right ahead.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Yes, I feel that some of these problems is that the education was taken out of the schools. Education need to be back in school, but not only that. You see that these minibuses and these ZRs and all of those that the children travel in, that they prefer to travel in. That has a lot to do with it too, because when they get into the school, they already have this type of thing in their head, and their head with all of this dirty music and all of that type of thing, and even the very children will be dancing to it.
Okay,
and I feel that
your
has a
responses?
lot to do with it.
Your responses?
Ramsay?
As I said at the beginning, there are so many issues that we face. The 80s with the ZR culture. I understand the ZR is a subculture. Unfortunately, it has been left to fester, and it is, in my opinion, out of control right now. But I cannot sit here and blame the ZR culture for the behaviors of our young people. As I said on Friday in a meeting, we have to start looking from within the home. The parents are the first agents of socialization. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for parents to understand the role they play in socializing their children to be productive and respectful citizens in society. When that fails, we have failed basically. The parents play a major role. Outside of that, there are parents who have tried with their children and they still get up to mischief. We have to capture those children before they end up in the criminal justice system. And we already know what the risk factors are. What we need to do is to put safety nets in place to make sure that these persons get the help that they need before they end up with a prison number or worse, being killed. Because that is the reality that we face. Unfortunately, many persons who are victims, and not all, many persons who become victims of homicide, when you look at their victimology, they have been offenders and they've been involved in the criminal lifestyle. We have to work on these persons in terms of treatment, in terms of addressing the risk factors that they face so that they do not become statistics, basically.
Okay.
And as I said, we know what the factors are. We just have to put the systems in place in terms of treatment programs, in terms of working with them, social workers, other agencies, juvenile liaison scheme is there. Working with families, at-risk families, which is also being addressed. But we need to widen the scope and the net in terms of those persons who are considered high risk.
Okay, we want
and
to
may end up in the criminal justice system.
Okay, we want to give Errol, Mr. Errol Griffith, his chance now in terms of your parting words in relation to crime and its root causes, and how do we stem the growth of this criminality?
When they want to take the high road, I would love for us as a nation, if we can create a culture of people taking more and more responsibility or total responsibility for themselves, understanding that they can't change anyone or anything outside themselves, to be able to really accept people and circumstances for what they are, that you can't change them, you can try to influence them, where we can exist as a society with a much greater level of peace, because we learn how to accept people and things that we can't control, but yet can still seek the influence. And then creating a culture of where we want to make nothing but wise choices. Is that easy? No, man. Did that sound ideal? But I think we got to strengthen people at all levels. And then the other things is to help people who have made mistakes to learn how to forgive themselves, but recognize that they're not imperfect and that other people make mistakes also, to be able to influence in us learning how to forgive others, and then us believing that we as a people can learn how to exist in peace wherever we are. Where we live, where we work, and where we play. And so I take the high road. Let's seek to influence the wider culture and help each individual to be stronger and be able to make better and better choices.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, but alongside us making those choices, we also need to be able to factor into some systems which will help to give the necessary and relevant support. I want to thank my guest this evening, Ms. Kim Ramsay, a criminologist in the Office of the Attorney General, and Mr. Errol Griffith, who's President and People Development Specialist with the Power of Choice, Inc. I also want to thank you, our callers this evening, for keeping the program moving, and you, our audience, for tuning in to the People's Business this Sunday. Crime, the root causes. How do we address them? How can we stamp them out? We've heard from two panelists here about what we need to do, and we as individuals all want to see a safer environment. We may not get rid of all crime, but we definitely want to reduce the level it's at now, as well as its intensity. One life lost is always too many. Thank you for joining the People's Business. I'm Wendy Burke. Have a great evening.
Thank you.